Let's get started. So I'm going to turn off my video. Oh, Eric, before we turn off our video, let's just introduce ourselves. So hi, everybody. Welcome to our email response time webinar. I'm Jeff Toyster and one of your co-hosts today. And I've just completed a study on how fast customers expect to receive a response to email. So we'll share that in just a moment. I'm joined today by Eric Simonson. Eric, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing well, and the Brits coined keeping calm and carry on, and that's what we'll do. These are challenging times, but this too shall end. I work with and for SuperOffice, which is one out of several options when it comes to the nuts and bolts and the mechanisms that can support a customer service department or case. I've been doing that for quite a while. I'm located in the southeast part of the US, Florida, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time to talk about some of the options that lies under this whole thing. Customer service is more than just a department, it is an attitude, but we need people and we need technology, and the technology is one of the things that I deal with and hopes to bring something sensible to the discussion.
I'm happy that you're joining me today, Eric. For those of you who might not be familiar with SuperOffice, we're going to share with you a few things in just a moment. But I asked Eric to join me today for a couple of reasons. One, SuperOffice has reduced their reply time from 5 hours to 1, and we'll see a few things today about how they did that. But second, Eric's company's also produced a lot of their own research on emails. And one thing that's shocking to me is how many companies don't reply at all. I mean, we're talking today about fast response, but not replying at all. And a few companies out there, you know who you are, including my bank, still waiting to hear from you. Okay, well, so let's get started. Eric, I am going to turn off my video and I will share with us, we've got a deck here to share with some information about what we've discovered. Oops, my video's still on. Here it is. And if you'd like to chat with us throughout, though, we'll take your questions throughout. We will certainly do that. So how to respond quickly to customer email. And I'll share with you our agenda. We'll start with some results of this recent survey. So you'll see exactly what customers are thinking right now. We'll share with you some proven tactics, both on the technology side and also just the agent side. And then we'll also take your questions. I encourage you to use that chat button to launch the chat window and share what questions you have throughout the webinar. So let's talk about the results of the survey. So this is a survey that I've done several times now. Last time was in 2018. This year I did two things I've not done before. One is, in the past, it was just focused on US consumers. This year, I focused on US, United Kingdom, and Canada. And I got responses from over 3,000 total customers. And so I want to be able to share with you not only what people in general are saying or expecting, but also maybe a little bit of a regional flavor as well. And I can tell you that overall, our customers are suggesting they want responses in an hour or less to customer email. So let's look at the results. First, let's take a quick look at the results by country. And this was kind of interesting to me. I would have expected, I understand this is a bias, that Americans, like myself, wanted a fast response. And that's not what the results say at all. I mean, we all want a fast response, but it's my friends in Canada that have an expectation for the highest response time. So all of this data suggests that nearly a third or more than a third of your customers want a response in an hour or less. And the challenge is if you take longer than that, then that's a huge section of customers who might be upset. But this also should tell you that depending on where your customer base is, you might have higher or slightly lower response time expectations. Now, in past studies, I was only looking at the United States, and one aspect of the survey was how many customers want a response in 15 minutes. Forget an hour. I want a response in 15 minutes. This is one bright spot. So I don't have historical data for the UK or Canada, but looking at my last 3 studies, I guess the bright spot is the really, really fast responses have gone down. I think those people have probably migrated to chat or other more real-time communication channels. But so while more people want a fast response in an hour or less, there's a smaller percent that want that 15-minute response time. So that's a little bit of breathing room. However, caveat, your customers might be a higher percentage of the group who wants a faster response. So you have to understand who your customers are as well. Now, within the US, I was able to look at different regions, and you can see in the West, Southwest, Midwest, fairly similar, but boy, if your customers are in the Northeast, that's New York City, Boston, for example, they might expect an even faster response. So again, depending on where your customers are located or what your customer profile is, that could change things a little bit. Now, I wasn't able to see any big differences by gender. So males and females, it seems like everybody had similar response time expectations. But look at the age groups here. The really, really young customers expect a faster response in that 25 to 34 or 35 to 44 age range. But as our customers are getting older, they're expecting faster and faster responses. That 55 to 64 demographic, who are typically baby boomers who are still working, expect the fastest responses of all. So again, this is a generalization. This may or may not apply to your customers. This may or may not surprise you, but it does tell us that if we have different primary customer demographics, then we might have customers who are even more or perhaps less demanding in terms of how quickly we respond to an email. So I want to launch a poll question. I'm curious to know how you are all feeling about this. And let's see if I can launch the poll here. So your options are great. We're already doing this. Okay, we're not doing it now, but we think we can. Fine. Our customers don't need a faster response. We're doing whatever. If we're responding in 4 hours, that's good. Or freaked out. There's no way we can meet the response time standard. So I will be quiet for just about 10 seconds to give you a chance to respond, and then I'll share the results. And Eric, I don't know if you can you see the results right now, or is it just me?
I cannot see it.
Oh, okay. So where do you think most people are landing? We have a majority picking one response. Where do you think they're landing, if you had to guess?
I would say number 2, okay. We think we can meet.
That's it. That is. Hopefully you can see this now. Over half
Yes.
people who responded to the poll said, I think we're okay. We can meet that. That's why you're tuned in today. I feel bad if you're freaked out, but hopefully Eric and I in just a moment can share with you a few things to make you feel better. These are some proven techniques to improve response time and improve the quality of your responses. And some of you are responding in an hour. So for those of you who did participate in the poll, thank you. I will remove that now. Take it away from the screen. Okay. So Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you. And I know you have some very straightforward techniques to share with us that have to do with how we process or handle email. And for those of you tuning in, Eric's going to take us through the journey of an email from where a customer actually submits it to what we do on the back end. And I think he's got some really great tips to share with us that many of you can think about in terms of your own process. So Eric, I'll turn it over to you, and let's put up the first one here.
Yes. An email in this context is best started with a form that's presented on your site. The key thing here is to find the balance between what do we need to know to help a customer, but not more. In other words, if you put in too much, the customer will sort of lose interest. If we put in too little, the user, your rep, is not able to help them. The other thing is that this makes it uniform. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have one form. You can have multiple forms per site, depending on the area or the service that's being offered or the issue that's being handled. But start off with a uniform form to collect information that you have defined as this is what we need to help the customer get the process started. And that triggers an email. Next slide. The key thing is that once we get that email processed, automation takes over to the extent where we want to send an auto reply. We're telling them that we got your email. We don't want to be in a position where if they wait longer than they anticipate that they will send another one or another one. Set up that autoresponder with rules. Give the user a case number. You might also want to say in that email, we might help them help themselves by embedding links to an FAQ or some sort of other resource so that they can help themselves. Set up some expectations. We will respond within 1 hour or 2 hours or whatever the case may be. And enter a phone number. Yes, some of them might call, but it gives people a bit of a more sense of, I have control. If I don't hear anything, I still have that number to call. And it might, in fact, cause fewer calls to come in because that control is inherent in that number. Now, there are, of course, different companies with different needs, and that auto-response can, of course, be set up to say 1 hour if conditions is X and Y and Z, or if it comes in, say, over a weekend, versus something else if it comes in at another time. Different companies have different opening hours and service hours and that sort of thing. So that is one of the key things about an auto-response. Next slide. Emails shouldn't be sent to individuals. They should be sent to generic addresses. So in this case, we have an example here of info and support and demo. Other generic ones could be something like product info or administration or billing or something like that. The reason for why we do this is that if everybody gets an email as a copy, then people will think that somebody else will take care of it. Therefore, it will fall through the cracks. If no one gets it, it will also fall through the cracks. So in this case, for each of these email boxes, we have members. You assign members with weights based upon their skill sets. Who is best prepared to answer those kinds of questions if all else is equal? We'll talk a little bit later on about skill sets and whatnot. And then we should also find some sensible way to assign cases. Do we do it on the basis of everybody gets the same, or based upon the weight of their skill sets, or based upon the fact that they're logged in or not, or how many cases do they have in their caseload pending at this time? Making sure that those rules are set up is a key element of a good workflow when it comes to who gets what in regards to each of these mailboxes. The other thing to also keep in mind is that in some cases you might want to automate it all. In other cases, you might have a master of ceremony, particularly in more demanding environments, where somebody will say, this case needs to go to person A or B because of their skill sets and availability. Next slide. A good system will have reports galore. In this case, we only use 2 as an example. We want to measure the right things so that we can take the right kind of action. Now on the top one, okay, it says here that we have an average time to reply per priority. Now, the question is, how do we measure that? Is it only on the basis of how quickly we reply? That can have its own drawbacks, as Jeff will talk about later. Because a fast reply that doesn't add any value is just that, a fast reply. It's not necessarily a good one. Going down to the second report example, we notice here that we have somewhat of an average, and then we have outliers. Abigail handles a lot more than John. Why is that? Does she have more skills? Is she working harder? Does she get cases that are easier? This will allow us to measure these things and make appropriate changes in case there's a little bit of an offbeat and identify the outliers. In this case, a fairly simple example, but we can apply that to all kinds of metrics and measurements. On that note, customer service is in most cases a team effort. And if everybody can pick their own things, you tend to pick the easy ones. The other thing is that in this kind of a scenario, there is a learning curve involved. How do you share the knowledge within the organization to where that curve is flattened out? Again, these examples basically tells us about outliers and see where is there room for improvement and how should cases be assigned. That concluded my quick introduction to some of the mechanics and some of the things to consider in a customer service environment.
Eric, I appreciate you sharing this. I know from talking to a lot of customer service leaders, they don't always have good data, or to your point, they don't always know the why behind their data. So for example, if we're looking at Abigail versus John, I think a lot of us might say, hey, Abigail is the champion, but I can tell you about instances where Abigail is actually causing more problems than she's solving because she's responding so quickly. She's not actually taking the time to provide complete responses. And so her incomplete responses are generating more emails per issue than someone else. So it's such a great point to make sure you're looking at the data. We have a quick question before I move on. Eric, we've got a quick question here from Thomas who's saying, do you recommend auto reply for email when working from home? I have a book of customers I serve and also have internal team members I email periodically during the day. So I don't know if you have a response to that. I definitely do, but I want to check with you first.
I would say, yes, there should be an autorespons, so that you don't get the third or fourth email. In other words, the idea is not necessarily to solve it, but to say, we did get your request and we're working on it. What you set up in terms of expectations otherwise, insofar as response time, is a different story. But yes, I believe that an auto reply should be set up, if for nothing else, to say, we received it in good order.
So I think one thing we have to clarify here, and this is such a great question, is there is a difference in emails that are going to an individual. So a customer is emailing you personally, your personal email address, it's a client that you have a relationship with, versus an email that's going to a company in general. And so my study looked at emails that are going to a company in general. I did do a subset of the study though that looked at emails sent to coworkers, and that just got scary. it was 41% of coworkers, or 41% of survey respondents expected coworkers to respond in an hour or less. So I think, Thomas, the answer to your question, it really depends. If you have a general expectation that's set with your customers or your colleagues, and for some reason you'll be out of the office or it's different today, an auto response is very helpful. On the other hand, if you don't have a general expectation and they're emailing you personally, but not the group as a whole, I think that's where there is some tension. And I think part of, at least internally, a 1 hour response time standard internally is unreasonable. It's unreal. Meetings last an hour. So I'm supposed to check email during meetings? No. I think if we need to set better, I think, expectations with our colleagues, that email is for non-emergency communication. And if there's an emergency, then let's use a more real-time channel. But we defeat that. We help that expectation along by responding to emails in 15 minutes and having emails always up. So it's a fantastic question, one that has a little bit of nuance, right, depending on several variables. I want to point out, so the screenshots that you saw from Eric here are from SuperOffice. You don't need a particular technology to manage your email, but I think it's good to have some technology to help out. And so you can see some of the capabilities. If you'd like to see more, you can go to this website, superoffice.com/demo. I'll put that into the chat box here as well. And take a test drive just to see if this is a technology that can help you get a better handle on your email, as well as the rest of your customer service function. I'd like to share with you a few agent-specific tactics that you can use to help your agents handle email both faster and better. And I want to ask you a poll question before I do. And let's see, I want to get rid of that poll here, and I'm going to bring up the next poll here. The question is, do you currently have your agents or employees handle emails, in other words, respond to emails in between calls or chats? So I'm going to leave that up for just a moment, give you a chance to respond. And also, by the way, if you have more questions for us, please send them via chat. We'll pause as needed, and we've also set aside some time at the end. All right, I'm about to close the poll. Let's see. Oh, there's a clear answer that's emerging here. Oh boy. All right, last chance to get your vote in. Okay, I'm gonna shut this down here. I'm gonna share the results. 82% of you who responded said, yep, we have our agents handle email in between calls or chats. So my first tip for you, friends, is to stop doing that. That will improve both productivity and quality in your email and in your calls or chats. And I don't want you to take my word for it. I want you to run your own experiment and see if I'm right or not. So here's why this works, and here's what's happened every time I've done this experiment. Imagine you're in the middle of an email, you're reading it, you're trying to understand what the customer is asking you for. And let's face it, customers are not good at describing what they need. So you're really having to concentrate, and then the phone rings. So you stop reading the email, you switch your brain mentally to that phone, but you've already lost a second or two of creating rapport and starting with energy and enthusiasm in that phone call. The phone call ends, probably could have been better if you'd been focused when you answered the phone. Now you go back to the email, and you can either start reading it again, which is repetitive work, or you can try to just jump in and guess where you were in the process. So either way, you're likely to miss important context and information in that email, and at best, you're going to keep reading it over and over and over again. So here's what you can do instead. It's counterintuitive, but again, I would suggest try this out, because every time I've seen companies do it, it works. Separate your email and your phone teams. and have people focus on just one channel at a time. Now, what you can do throughout the day, if you're getting more phone calls, then you can move another person or two or several into the phone queue and have them set email aside. And if phone gets more under control, then you can move people from phone into email. Most of the time when I talk to contact center leaders, their email and phone patterns aren't exactly the same. And so we have the ability to do that. So that is the first tip I'll share with you. If you can move people to focus on one channel at a time, it seems like it's not working because people are calmer. But if you look at your stats at the end of the day, you will see better written emails that go out faster, and you will see better quality phone calls that take a few seconds less to resolve. So that's tip number one. Got two more for you. Metrics. Metrics is tip number two. And what's the tip specifically? Stop putting productivity metrics in front of your agents. So if you have a leaderboard or a daily goal and you put it in front of your agents, then what you will get are agents who race through their emails and work a little too fast to respond, let's say within an hour. So earlier, Eric shared with you where you could measure our average response time or individual agent productivity. Those are fantastic tools for the manager. That's what the manager should look at. And when you see outliers who are going way faster or way slower, let's investigate, let's find out what they're doing and give feedback. But if I put a goal in front of an agent, often what I'll get is someone who races through and tries to get as many emails done as possible. And they often miss important aspects of the email, or they don't fully answer customer questions. I recently had an email exchange where it took 6 emails to answer a simple question. Every single email was responded to within 1 hour, but I never got a complete response until the very end because the rep wasn't fully reading my email. Now, what happens if we don't fully read an email? We generate more email, and all of a sudden our email queue is a lot bigger than it should be, and more volume means it's harder to respond quickly. So take those metrics away from your agents so they're not constantly staring at their email response time or emails per hour, and ask them simply to focus on writing really good, well-crafted emails, quickly, of course, but thoroughly answering customer questions. Okay, that's the second tip. The third tip I'm going to involve you in on this one. I had to write an email to a hotel that I stayed in, and I did not get my rewards points. And so I emailed the hotel company. I'd like to ask you to read this email and then tell me if you can spot any problems with it that this email might cause. So you can do this via chat. I'll be quiet for just a few seconds to give you a chance to do this. Again, as you read the email, I'll ask if you'd like to respond via chat. Can you see any problems that this email might cause? And as you're responding, I want to point out in chat, you have the ability to toggle who you're chatting with. So you can toggle to all panelists. That means just me and Eric. All panelists and attendees. That means everyone that's on this webinar. So up to you. Okay, so a few different things here. Too many different ways to respond. Let's see, passing the buck, absolutely, making me do it. Someone wants to help, but is really, you can tell they're using a template, right? Hey, we're here to help. I'm not going to help you, and we're always here to help. So that template is really obvious and annoying. They're making me take extra steps, right? Which a lot of you have pointed out. Now think about this though, from a perspective of email. So we have the hotel company, the customer service department, which Lizzie is a part of, and then we also have the hotel. And there's a few different things going on here. One is Lizzie's response almost certainly is going to generate additional email to Lizzie. In other words, even if I call the hotel, you better believe I'm going to send at least one more email to Lizzie saying, this is ridiculous. Why can't you handle it? So we're generating additional email that might need to be addressed by not doing things a little bit better. Poor Lizzie, though, I think if I had to guess, knowing what I know, Lizzie may not have had a choice here. In other words, Lizzie may have had a productivity target that was so tight that Lizzie was not able to take that extra step of contacting the hotel for me. And Lizzie probably did not have access to the rewards point systems where she could have just taken care of it. So in this case, my knowledge tells me that Lizzie is not empowered to do anything to help me out other than sending this email. And the best thing that could have been done is just to erase the garbage in this template that creates a conflicting message. So if we were to empower Lizzie a little bit more, there's a couple of options we can think of. One is the best option, just give Lizzie access. Boom, you've got your rewards points. So sorry about that. And away you go. That's the easiest way. But if Lizzie doesn't have access and we don't have the ability in our department to give Lizzie access, by relaxing some of those response time restrictions, Lizzie could have sent an email to me saying, hey, Jeff, I got this case. I'm on it. I do need to contact the hotel. It's going to take a day for me to receive a response, and I will promise to get back to you by 5 p.m. tomorrow. So notice the initial response might come in an hour, but what Lizzie would be doing is a very friendly way of buying time for a non-emergency issue, and most customers are going to be great with that. And if Lizzie wanted, she still could have included the contact information. If you prefer to handle this or want faster service, you can call the hotel directly, but rest assured I'm on it, so you don't need to do that. That would be a way of taking just a little extra time to avoid additional emails. So we have covered 3 different tips from the agent side of things, whether it's focusing on one channel at a time, eliminating agent-facing productivity metrics that cause them to work too fast, or just empowering our agents to handle emails once. I want to give you a few more resources that will help you and your teams overcome some of these types of obstacles that are maybe a little bit counterintuitive. It's a workbook with 10 customer service training exercises you can use to uncover some of these types of issues. And I'm going to send you my weekly email tip. It's not just about email, although it certainly covers email. It covers the broad spectrum of customer service. It's called Customer Service Tip of the Week. 1 email, 1 tip, once per week. To get those, just text the word hidden to 66866. Unfortunately, that only works in the United States. If you're outside the US, just use the website, oystersolutions.com/hidden. I want to give you a second to check that out. And then Eric and I are going to take some time to respond to your questions. So if you will, what questions you have about meeting your customers' email response time expectations. We're going to, in just a moment, turn our cameras back on. I'm going to pull this slide off the screen so you'll be looking at us. So if you will, use chat to send us the questions that you have. All right, here comes the cameras. Still here. And we're going to pull this off the screen. There's Eric, there's me. Let's see. All right. So Eric, we got had a great question earlier on auto responses. And while we're waiting for some folks to come in with whatever additional questions they might have, I want to ask you a little bit about auto responses. Do you find that as a customer, do you if you're emailing an individual versus a company, do you expect someone to to have an auto response set up if they're going to take a day or less to respond to you?
No, I do not. Personally, it is, as you said, you cannot expect an individual to respond within an hour, be it that it's a colleague or a supplier. I mean, for all you know, that person might be on an airplane or stuck in traffic or whatever else. The rules are very different, I think, and the expectations should be very different between an email that you send to an individual versus a generic email, particularly if the company behind it is fairly large. So no, a 1-hour response is not the right expectation. And emails can be used for many things, but if something is on fire and you need somebody's help that is a colleague, you get on the phone.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. And it's tough because we're in a webinar right now. We might have customers emailing us that you haven't responded. No, and then I think if you respond thoroughly and you generally respond quickly, that's good. And most people will be okay with that. We've got a great question here from Vilta. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. And if not, please accept my apologies. What is a must for an auto response from a company? So Eric, I think we probably have different perspectives to offer from a technology side, maybe to a content side. In terms of just setting up the autoresponsers, is there anything that comes to mind in terms of musts that companies should consider?
It should be somewhat personalized. In other words, you don't put in dear customer. You say, dear John, dear Jim, dear Jack, because they have already given you their name in that form, if the form was set up correctly. It should give a reference number, some sort of sequence where people, when they look at it, they say, okay, when I call, I have something more than just that. It should also include some sort of self-help. Of course, it all depends on the business that you're in. But most of the time, people will ask questions where 80% of the questions garners 20% of the responses. And that's why an FAQ built up over time is helpful. You can even, if the intelligence is there, and I'm talking about in the software, say that if somebody puts in a keyword in the text when it says help, what can we help you with? An FAQ will come up and say, chances are that your questions can be found in one of these articles. So that, I think, is the key. And then the last one is phone still matters. People want to know that they can, in fact, pick up the phone if need be. That is what I think should be included in an auto-response as a minimum.
I think you nailed it. You know, one thing that people are concerned about sometimes is, well, if I put my phone number, won't they just call? And I've seen some interesting studies around that customers feel better if you give them ready access to a human, but they don't necessarily take advantage of that. And I can tell you from personal experience, I put my phone number and my email address in every single book that I write. And I do get phone calls, I do get emails, I get texts, but not so many that I can't handle them. Most people just like to know that it's there. Now, here's what customers don't like: if they have to hunt for your information. And what happens if you don't set good expectations in that email auto response, then they'll create their own expectations. And so if you respond in 2 hours and customers expect a response in 1 hour, 1 hour goes by, then they're going to call. And if they have to hunt for your phone number, they're extra annoyed by the time they get on the phone. And then that call takes longer to resolve and the customer is less happy. Now, one thing I want to clarify, Eric, I like this idea of this confirmation number. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably have to be tied into a customer service or customer relationship management system to auto-generate some of that information, like a confirmation number that's tied to a record. Is that correct?
That is correct. And yes, if the nature of the business is such that that is really not needed, it of course becomes an impossibility. But if you're using some sort of customer service / help desk system, that is the kind of capability that they all offer. So if it is available, use it. Obviously, if you don't use that kind of a system, it becomes less of an issue. But if it's there, use it.
That makes sense. And I know we don't always have the technology available to do everything that we want. I think what Eric's talking about is a very rudimentary system can do that. Your system that you have today might have features to enable you to do that right now. One thing that I see is a big challenge is we have unmonitored email boxes. In other words, info@acmecorp.com goes nowhere, or the customer gets a response and it says, don't reply to this response. It's not monitored. Those are terrible practices. You're putting up roadblocks in front of your customers that almost guarantee no good thing will happen. So be careful about that. And it's a good idea to audit all of the email addresses that you have on your website and anywhere else to make sure they go somewhere and you have a good process for handling that. We've got another question from Margaret. I love the FAQs linking based upon question type. It's a huge issue for us as our customers are all internal and a university. If we see the question could be answered with the FAQ, what's our next step? So in other words, no matter how often we've tried to direct them, they just want us to tell them. So there's a couple of things here with FAQs. I would say if you are getting questions consistently via email or phone or other live context that we could answer via FAQ, there's a couple of things to consider about the FAQs themselves. One is, are they obvious and apparent in the time of need? So if you share with me in an email, hey, next time you get this issue, here's how to solve it, and I don't have that issue for 6 more months, I'm going to forget where I put that little email you sent me, and I go to find your contact information. If it's not easy for me to find, then I probably will ignore it. The second is the FAQ itself written and presented in such a way that is easy and obvious for customers to follow it? And I would say I'd look at those two different things, and often that will reduce the amount of those questions that you get that could be offered via FAQ. Eric, any other tips for FAQs that in terms of getting people to actually use them?
Yes. Within each organization, you have people that, first of all, know the issues and the products and the services that you offer. And typically, somebody in that organization will become a FAQ editor. In other words, you get a question and you look at patterns and you say, this question is asked over and over and over again. And what we're doing is that we're looking for some keywords, usually more than one keyword, and say that whenever those keywords appear in an email, we will basically refer that back to an FAQ, the editorial control of what should be an FAQ, both with respect to the question as well as the answer, is of course under the editorial control of whoever you designate. And so when an email comes in with those keywords, the response could include, based upon your email, we think that this FAQ may help you. So in other words, the content of the FAQ, of the response, is driven by the content of the email as determined by whoever is the editor of the help desk, if you will. If that makes sense, hopefully, Margaret.
Absolutely. And it's, editing the emails, I think, is such the FAQs is such an important part. Even looking for what are called null searches. So in a university, if someone searches for course and they miss an article that they would have seen if they searched for class, editing those, even those types of keywords, making sure that the search results will appear when you use a variety of different terms that mean the same thing. All of those little tweaks can make the difference. I think we might have time for just one more question. And then if you have a chance to send us any more questions that you'd like via chat, I'm also going to email you probably later today with a replay of this webinar. And so if you think of something we didn't answer, just respond to the email and we'll get back to you. So we've got one more question I think we have time for today, Eric. I'm in L2 support. I'm going to guess level 2 support, where we need time to analyze the problem before we provide some reply. Are there any tips for the faster response from level 2 and level 3 support? I definitely have some ideas about this from my own experience. But Eric, any suggestions that you could think of?
Yes, sometimes things take more time because they are more complicated. L2 is typically where L1 simply doesn't know or have the proper answer. The L1 should have, of course, uh, passed the case on to somebody else. You can have a little autoresponder there that says to whoever started the case that, you know, your issue is a little bit more complicated. We have escalated this to a higher level of support. Please bear with us as we will get back to you as soon as we can. But in that case, you might not set the expectation for a quantifiable time frame. You could say something like, it has been escalated, we're working on it. That, I think, is the best kind of reply that I would say. I mean, expectations can be managed, but when there are complicated things involved, you might not want to set the expectation by X number of hours in way of a response. I hope that helps.
So, and here is a way around this, because Eric, what you're talking about is, I don't know if this problem is going to take me 3 hours, 4 hours, 2 days to solve. And so if I say I'll get back to you, you know, I'll solve it in 4 hours, I might be wrong. What I would suggest is to a couple of setting up your rules internally a couple of different ways. First, when there's a handoff from level 1 to level 2, and level 2 or level 3 in terms of tiered support levels is going to require someone to run the case, if you will, or manage the case. Then the first rule should be either an auto response or an actual email that says, hey, I'm Jeff, I'm handling this issue now, and I'm going to give you an update by this date and time. So I notice I didn't promise I'm going to solve it for you. I just gave you a specific date and time when I will reconnect with you. Now, the second rule is, in some support queues, it only goes, all email only goes to a generic box. This is the case where I would change that. It gets escalated to level 2. I'm on it. If the customer replies to my email, I want the rule so it goes right to my email, and I don't have to have somebody else read all of the notes to get caught up on what's going on and see where I am and reply on my behalf. I want to be able to respond directly when I'm working a case like this. The third step then is, I want to have some sort of reminder system, whether it's midday, the end of the day, or whatever it is, just to come back to customers and say, hey, I promised you an update by this date and time. Here's where we are, and here's when I will give you the next update. And the reason for doing this is it's a lot faster and easier for both you and the customer to set clear expectations and specific expectations up front, and personalize the interaction just a little bit. If a customer knows, hey, by noon today, your time, I will give you an update, they're probably going to leave you alone and give you the space to solve it. If they don't have that information, you have a higher likelihood of more emails, more phone calls. Customers start what's called channel racing. They'll go to social media, they'll go to chat, they'll go to phones. Pretty soon, 4 agents are having to deal with the same issue when it could have been just one. So those would be my suggestions to tweak that a little bit. And if you can do that, you've bought yourself some time and you've created a better feeling, a little more personal feeling with the customer. All right, I think we're running out of time here. We want to make sure that we finish a little early to give you some of those time back to go respond to all the people that expect a 1 hour response time. We are recording this webinar. Later today, you'll get an email with a link to the recording. I should have told you a specific time, right? So I'm on Pacific time, which means it's 11:49 Pacific right now. And I will commit to you to making sure I send that email out by 3 p.m. Pacific. So just over 3 hours from now, that will be the latest that email will arrive in your inbox. So Eric, thanks for joining me today. I appreciate it. This was really cool to have you.
Thank you very much for having me, and appreciate the time taken by all, and for some very good questions.
All right, y'all. Thank you for tuning in. Take care.